Hello, everybody. It's great to be here one more time today. My name is Gary Fowler. I'm the CEO, president, founder of GSD Get Shit Done Venture Studios, a premier AI and quantum venture studio located in the heart of Silicon Valley. I'm a 17-time serial entrepreneur with several unicorns under the belt. I was on the original management team at Click Software, which was sold to Salesforce for $1.35 billion, and also Eva.ai, an AI HR tech company I co-founded with Dr. David Yang. We believe at GSD that intellectual capacity is evenly spread, but opportunities are not. Today, I'm joined by an extraordinary entrepreneur and technology leader, Steven Walchek, co-founder and CEO of Liminal, the leading secure AI governance and enablement platform, helping enterprise move from AI experimentation to measurable business outcomes. His career spans more than 15 years at the forefront of innovation. He's played leadership roles across startups and Fortune 500 companies, contributed to 3 successful exits totaling more than $1.1 billion and acquisition value, helped build and scale strategic technology ecosystems at AWS, generating over $280 million in new revenue, and later served as Executive Vice President and Chief Innovation Officer at FIS, where he launched multiple venture-backed subsidiaries and innovation initiatives. Today, Liminal, Steven is helping organizations solve one of the most important challenges of the AI era: how to securely deploy, govern, measure, and improve the value of artificial intelligence at enterprise scale. My conversation today is entitled The Behavioral Shift, Moving Enterprise AI from Prediction to Proof. We'll explore the future of AI governance, enterprise adoption, trust, security, compliance, ROI measurement, and what separates companies that are fully transforming with AI from simply experimenting. So with that, I'd like to bring him on board. Hi, Steven. How are you today?
Gary, thanks so much for having me. Excited to be here. I'm doing really well.
You've had success as a founder, an AWS executive, and a Fortune 500 innovation leader. Looking back, what experience most influenced your approach to building Liminal?
To building Liminal, I think it's probably a combination of different experiences. I grew up in a household that valued taking risk. My father's an entrepreneur. He's done it several times. And I think growing up and understanding that there's a rationale to betting on yourself, to going all on yourself, and to this belief that, why can't I do that? If they can do it, why can't I do it? Is a really big part of why I started Liminal. It's a big part of why I started my first company. I think there's this notion of having a heavy appetite for risk and going all in on yourself and the people around you that I think is just built into my DNA. So that's probably part one. And in terms of corporate experience, I had the fortunate opportunity of working alongside several really great entrepreneurs as I was coming up through the ranks. I started my first company when I was 19. My dad and I co-founded it together, actually. And then we took that to an acquisition by Intercontinental Exchange, which is a company that owns New York Stock Exchange. It was really cool. We didn't make any money on the deal, but we certainly had a really cool experience going through that. And then I joined founding teams and leadership teams of 2 other startups that got acquired. And those leaders, Brian Bogensberger opening Tank, and then a few of the leaders at SolidFire were tremendous influences on me in terms of helping me understand what it took to take a company, I'd say, from 0 to over $50 million in ARR, and so that played a really big role. And then I think the time I spent at AWS probably was the capstone for me, or my graduation class, and learning how to operate a company with a really high performance scale, and a high performance team, and how to hire appropriately. And I think I look back so fondly at my time at AWS because it really did set me up to lead appropriately. So I got to tell you, it's not just one thing, right? It's a confluence of having grown up in a house that has a strong appetite for risk, of having been around tremendous leaders of other startups that were acquired, and then being able to experience what it was like. On the very first day, third day that I was at AWS, I was in a room with Tom Siebel, who's the father of the modern CRM, and Andy Jassy and myself. And I had no business being in this room. I was 30 years old. I'm running their technology partner team, and here I am contributing to a meaningful conversation about what was at the time C3 IoT. Go ahead,
Steven. Why was Tom there? Because he was doing
C3 C3 AI now, but before that it was C3 IoT. And they were discussing a new relationship and a new partnership between AWS and C3 IoT. And Andy was there to kind of go CEO to CEO with Tom Siebel, and I was there to kind of track the outputs. And I remember sitting in that room going, like, I'm actually contributing here. I felt like I had no business belonging in the room with these two titans of industry. And here I am, little old me, and I'm actually participating, and I was contributing in a meaningful way. That was a huge boost to my own personal self-confidence, where I felt, hey, this is a room I actually belong in, and I can be here and go toe to toe with these incredible people, incredible leaders. So it was a really meaningful experience for me.
At AWS, you're involved with emerging technology companies like machine learning, IoT, and analytics before they became mainstream. What reminds you today of those early days when you look at AI?
I think AI is following the same tech cycle that same tech adoption cycle that every other technology that has come before it did, from IoT to cloud. All of these things initially started with a ton of hype. There was a significant amount of investment, not as much, of course, as there has been into AI, obviously, but you saw a substantial amount of investment. You saw a lot of companies experimenting, and then the classic Gartner hype wave trough of disillusionment came, and everybody started to downplay the technology and say, it wasn't as good as everybody thought it was going to be. And then, of course, the slope of enlightenment, where everybody realizes where the technology belongs in the stack. I don't think that this adoption wave with AI feels any different to the cloud adoption wave, or to the to the IoT adoption wave, to the fundamental kind of like the Bitcoin side. Like all of the all of that technology just kind of took a similar curve, and I think we're right there in the middle of that today. And I think we're probably right in the trough of disillusionment right now. Actually, I think we're 3.5 years into the revolution, and I think everybody's kind of, at least in my experience with the enterprises we deal with, we're right in the middle of, hey, I thought it was supposed to work this way. It doesn't. What does that mean for me in my buying cycle? What does that mean for me in my deployments?
So when you walk into a Fortune 500 boardroom today, what are the top 3 concerns executives have about deploying AI at scale?
I think it depends on the organization. I think the number one we hear kind of over and over again outside of our ideal customer profile is, what's the ROI on deploying this? And I think you go beyond that, then you get to security. People have strong positions on using cloud models because they don't feel like their data is secure or private. And then I think cost becomes a major concern as well. These are not cheap things to deploy. If you want to deploy a Cloud Max account with the design and the co-work capabilities and Cloud Code capability, where you're not going to run out of tokens in a minute, it's going to cost you $150 to $200 a month. And so you saw even recently Microsoft shut down access to cloud internally because the bill came and they said, we're not going to be able to afford this long term. So I think in that order right now is there ROI? Is it secure, and can I handle the cost of this? And I don't think you can get to an answer on 3 if you don't get to an answer on 1. But then the outputs on this are still fairly intrinsic in terms of their cost, or I'm sorry, their value. When people estimate ROI, they have to estimate productivity gains of an individual worker based on a tool that is still very new to them, that there's been virtually no training on how to use in the workplace. And so it becomes really difficult to measure ROI, even though you could say, hey, and I say this, by the way, outside of the engineering use cases where, software engineering is very measurable. You can see, did they make 10 PRs the month before? Now they've got coding agents, they're making 30 PRs. Okay, that's easy. But when it comes to a call center operative or operator or a salesperson, are they more effective or less effective? They're certainly not less effective. Are they more effective? Everyone who uses the tools would tell you absolutely categorically yes, but then how do you measure? What are those metrics for success? And then do those measure up to the traditional ROI metrics that an organization has? And I think that's very difficult to do. And so organizations then go, well, this has been a colossal failure. We've invested all this cash and capital and we haven't seen measurable ROI. And I think that's a little bit unfair to say it that way, but that's, I'd say, the number one concern right now. I don't know, Gary, would you say you've reflected that similar path in your experience?
I think so too. I mean, what do you think, Stephen? Do you think enterprise AIs entered the same phase cloud entered a decade ago, where governance became just as important as innovation? How much do we think about governance today compared to before? Is it going to become more and more important?
It's going to become critically important. In fact, I don't think that it will be optional, especially the more we start to lean into the agentic world. And when I say agentic world, we're starting to see workflow automations appear where AI is independently decisive of a human being. And when AI is independently decisive of a human being, you need governance. You need something to understand a decision was made here. I need to be able to observe how that decision was made, what decision was made, and what agent made it, what criteria led to that. And then I need to be able to know what was the outcome of that decision. That is classic governance. And right now, those tools are not available in kind of broad scale. Governance is the more people start to lean into the agentic workflows and driving greater automation into their company, no matter how simple the automation is, by the way, governance is absolutely critical and crucial for maintaining an appropriate posture around deploying agentic AI.
Many leaders view governance as slowing innovation. How do you convince organizations that governance can actually accelerate AI adoption?
Well, it depends on the size of the organization, but let's go with the largest, because that's probably maybe who you're talking about. And then we can back into this, maybe mid-sized companies, but for large companies, governance is crucial because as you saw with AWS, for example, I don't know if you recall how they went to market, but let's wind the clock back, call it a decade. And people had these small teams who were trying to shift burden from CapEx, which is I'm spending a bunch of money on machines and over provisioning the amount of compute in my organization, to I'm swiping a credit card and letting AWS handle the scaling of that. Well, the way that AWS went to market originally is they targeted these kind of rogue engineers inside of a company who just wanted to build an application, but were really annoyed by the fact that they couldn't figure out how to get that brand new 40U server in the organization. And so they would say, hey, guess what? You don't have to go wait for the shipping. You don't have to wait for somebody to go and provision this into your data center. We've got you covered. We have our primitive services available to you. You can set up a VM inside of AWS and you're off to the races. All you have to do is put in your corporate card. And that was a big boon for these companies. And that's how it started. It was kind of shadow groups that were doing this, and then it started to grow. And then all of a sudden the CFO would go, why are we paying $100,000 to this Amazon Web Services? What is Amazon's running a cloud business? Like, what even is the cloud? That's kind of what was like a decade ago, maybe even 12 years ago. But that's really where this whole thing started. And then now we're kind of seeing something similar with AI, where you've got a bunch of these smaller teams saying, hey, I want to be more effective at my job. I can go and swipe a credit card and get access to this really game-changing tool. Well, if you enforce governance over the top of that, you could theoretically slow things down. But if you go absent governance, you're going to get the CFO, CSO, CISO coming in and saying, absolutely not. We're not doing this. And not only am I going to shut down what you're doing today, we're going to take 20 steps back. Versus if you do this appropriately and you introduce governance early, you can actually get the CISO or the CISO, the CIO, and the relative members of that AI committee on your side. You can get them to say, hey, yeah, I'm a sponsor of this project. We did this correctly. We started with governance and we worked backwards from governance, as opposed to, oh, we've got a ton of this happening now. What are we going to do about it? The immediate gut reaction is, let's shut it down. Let's close this off. But when you involve the appropriate team members in order to drive towards that, it might take at the beginning much slower, but then you get exponential gains on the back end, because people are much more willing to roll it out at large, as opposed to trying to figure that out in reverse. Does that make sense, Gary?
It makes sense. I mean, what do you think is the biggest misconception? So we have executives on one side that that know or don't know about AI risk. What do you think? I mean, I don't think they know. They don't understand what they don't understand what multi-agent large language models can do. They don't understand what multimodal agents can do, and they don't understand the benefit of them too. The other thing is they don't understand the risk, but they understand the capabilities, which is bad because if you don't understand it, you're going to be on the outside looking in. You can see it happening every day now. These companies that were here and was stalwarts 4 years ago, 5 years ago, are not going to be there. They don't have a strategy. So these, they understand risk, but on the other hand, do they understand risk in the sense that if they don't do it, they're going to be out of business?
I think they're getting to the place where maybe I don't know if we're at the existential threat yet. In reality, I think people might buy into a bit of the hype around that, but I don't think we're anywhere near
existential threat, Steven. Just for the
like if you, I'm more responding to the statement of like if we don't do this, we're dead. I think it's more of we start to fall behind if we don't do this, and the reason I kind of push back on the existential threat now is if you recall, as soon as the AI revolution hit, if you didn't have some sort of AI in your company, I don't care who you were, what you did, you were now an AI company. Well, the market really pushed back against it. Not a lot of people bought a bunch of those tools, or they started to play with it, and then there's not a lot of retention on those tools, and that's because people just kind of haphazardly threw it in. Oh, now we have AI because we've got a chatbot built into our platform, and they didn't really understand how that chatbot was going to interface with their data or interface with their product, and it just ended up being a really poor experience. And so I'm going to reel on if those companies still exist, and they're still figuring out how to actually best integrate AI as opposed to just saying, hey, let's throw a chatbot in our platform and call ourselves AI ready. I also think that the market is still in a standard adoption cycle. We are in the beginning of this phase here. We're at the bottom of the trough of disillusionment right now, where people are expecting AI to have changed the world, and they're realizing, hey, I have a really great partner for a lot of different things. Automation is going to come slowly. And I think my expectations are limited if you're not a software engineer. If you're a software engineer, the world has completely changed. And it is an existential threat at this point for you if you're not using these tools, because you'll be outpaced and burned by your compatriots who are absolutely using these things. I do believe that. But in terms of the kind of rest in the vast majority of the workforce that aren't software engineers, I still think that there's a lot of time to understand how these tools best impact your role. And how to get the most out of them as they exist today, and then continue to allow the market to innovate while you are taking the very basic foundational layer, adopting that into your workflow, understanding how that exhibits itself, and then as the market matures around things like agentic AI, starting to incorporate that in. So there's a crawl, walk, run methodology here, and crawl is adopt the very basic versions of these tools, leverage them, understand them, really figure out where those automations could occur. And then as the automation capabilities start to come online, as they become easier for downstream users who are not necessarily technical, but still want access to that feature set, that's going to be I think the world where we start to hit that slope of enlightenment, where we start to see mass adoption of these things, where ROA becomes more traditionally available to leadership.
As AI agents become increasingly autonomous, what new governance challenges emerge compared to traditional AI systems?
I just think the sheer number represents a challenge, right? You can have 5 coding agents working for you simultaneously. You multiply that times 100 engineers, you've got 500 agents there. Then you start to have personal agents that are doing things for you. And then you have agents that are, managing agents, and you get all this other stuff that starts to come on. You can see, and I'm not saying that this is, by the way, the near future. I think we're probably 5 years, maybe 3 to 5 years from that being a meaningful problem. But I do think that becomes a really big issue. It's just the sheer volume of these things that can be introduced into someone's life. I mean, shoot, Gary, at the beginning of this call, you were talking about how you built this really cool agent that, listens in, helps you formulate questions as you're going through these podcasts here, and works, I'm sure, in a bunch of different ways in this life. I mean, you're obviously much more advanced than the majority of end users here that we tend to deal with, and that's okay. That's not to say anything poor about them. They're just not on the same level. But you already probably have 3, 4, 5, 7 agents working for you right now. You go to a company that's got 30,000 of you in there, and that's going to be a big problem for them to start to figure out, how do I manage at that scale 210,000 different what you would call independent acting machines. So that's probably the biggest concern I would have. And then I would say the second concern is much more around observability. Like, how are these things making decisions? Can I trace back their decisions? I mean, Claude Code's kind of a black box. It gives you little hints into how it made decisions, but it's not giving you a full observable trail of all logic and rationale into how it decided to write this particular series of code. Or if that's the kind of most mature agent right now, we're in trouble if these agents become black boxes in terms of decision-making capability. And I think people will not trust them as much as they deserve. So I think those are the two ones: scale and observability.
You know, the problem we have is infobesity, Stephen, from my perspective. It's 176 zettabytes of data on the planet Earth today. If you took DVDs or CDs that would go and stack them one on top of another, it would go 128 times between the Earth and the Moon. And it's grown at 69.6% per year. So the problem is data, infobesity. Think about in your own world, in Stephen's world. You've got about 257,000. You've got about 300,000 in your items in your personal cloud. The entire web in 1996 was 257,000 websites. You have more information in personal cloud than the entire web. The problem is Stephen's world's following the same trajectory of the World Wide Web. By that, I mean doubling every year. In 5 years with the Internet of Things, you're going to have 10 million items. You're a smart guy. You've been around the block a few years, right? You understand. But how many times the last 2 weeks somebody said, hey, Stephen, I sent you a message. Did you get it? Where'd you send it? To your email. Which one of the 7? I don't remember. Will you check? I can't find it. In fact, now you just say, just send it again or send it to WhatsApp. So these tools, we need these tools that have empathy and compassion, kind of like your grandmother that cares about you. I'm going to, I wrote a model where I took a operant conditioning Skinnerian approach. I tokenized goodness and I put an unconditional positive regard, love on top of it. And I created an empathetic, compassionate trust level. And the other thing is we don't talk about, Stephen, this is the part that bothers me the most. And I didn't see it in your stuff, right? Is empathy and compassion. If we don't build these systems that care about us, nothing good's going to happen, right? And unfortunately, they're built by pragmatic engineers. And I'm not saying it's bad, but I'm a shrink. I'm a clinical psychologist too. And one of the things that I look at is empathy and compassion. If you don't have that, nothing good happens. And how can you nurture somebody? Because we don't do good things to each other. We do bad things a lot of times. Look at what's happening on the planet Earth today. In fact, you can't make it up, Stephen. We've got aliens. We've got Ukraine. We've got Russia. We've got Iran. It's unbelievable. So we got to figure out, I spoke at the UN twice about technology tool for peace. We should be thinking about how we can use these tools in a cobot kind of way to work with us to be able to solve a lot of the challenges, right? And it's amazing.
I tend to agree, and it's getting harder and harder to understand how these things are shaped right now, just given the sheer scale of the public model providers. I mean, you've got, Google, Anthropic, and OpenAI are the kind of the top 3, and you've got people who are building more and more models, more and more research labs. You've got the open source guys like Mistral, but when you have trillion parameter models, you don't understand how decisions are made internally on these things. And I'd read something somewhere that Mir Murati was working on the transparency component of Gen AI and how these decisions were made. And I certainly hope that her startup begins to bloom here. That would be really cool, because I think you're absolutely right. We're going to enter a world where AI is going to, say, hey, this person's really inefficient and doesn't have any empathy for understanding, hey, there might be a better way to repurpose, that person's labor or job. Or, you just looked at what Gavin Newsom signed in California with the new AI bill that he did, and I think it's really interesting for the recognition to take place that, hey, for the first time in history, software engineers might need job retraining. That's included in the bill.
Well, and it's a problem, because these engineers have gone down through for so long, they were able to dictate the terms, and it's changed. I can't tell you how many times I'm in Palo Alto right now. Even yesterday, I was going from San Francisco down to Palo Alto, and the driver was an Uber driver, couldn't find a job, who had been a software engineer. And now she can't find a job because the market has changed. Here's the other thing is you got to upskill, right? So don't think about, it's not about software engineers. It's about orchestration of models, being able to be the person that can tie these things together to do incredible things. And we better, all of us, it's not just software engineering. All of us have better upscale. I mean, if I can, I grew up on a farm, and if I can build a cancer vaccine at molecular level for my dog and find a lab to be able to build it, well, imagine what somebody that's a smart person like you can do. I'm just a country boy. You can do anything, and I'm concerned about it, and
I think let's play the other side of that coin though, Gary, for a second. Like, I love what you just said. I can do anything. And I was having a conversation with another good friend of mine, who's easily, in my opinion, the best kind of traditional product manager ever. He's an MIT software engineering grad. He's super bright. And he's struggling to find work right now, which is just unbelievable to me, because this guy's the kind of, if you ever had desire to hire a PM, this is the one you would hire. And he's struggling to find work right now. But inherent to that is this notion that he is more so than ever feeling that he can create new things, that he can build something and actually bring it to market when he gets to utilize all this wonderful market knowledge that he has and start to build things and bring the market, educate others on how to do that. And in kind of the kind of underpinning tone there is that there is now this ability for individuals to become entrepreneurs better than ever before in history. And we are now, the kind of traditional barrier to entry, Gary, that might stop the farm boy from developing is gone. My dad is 65. He's running an AI startup, and he's been using Claude Code to write an application that interfaces with an ancient system in his house. I mean, my dad's not a software engineer. He's a smart guy, but that's not what he does. And I just think about that capability is never been, that barrier to entry is what prevented everyone from doing a startup. If you didn't have a quote unquote technical co-founder, you're not building anything. And now for the first time in history, that barrier is gone. Now we can talk about additional barriers like access to capital and, go to market experience, all that other stuff. But like, just at the baseline, the amount of people that can now become entrepreneurs and create for themselves. I have an idea. I want to go build it. I want to go try that. Is much better than ever before in history. And that in and of itself is really a good reason to be optimistic about how things are changing now. Gary, I totally agree with you on this notion of these models need to have empathy, and they need to have guidance, and they need to be caring for humanity, not trying to obliterate it, not trying to upend or change the societal structures that we put in place. But I will say that, I think from a healthcare perspective, you mentioned you built a vaccine for your dog. You helped cure your kidney disease. I've helped it diagnose health problems in friends and myself. There's all sorts of benefits that we're seeing that we don't even understand yet how they're going to manifest in the long term.
Well, I mean, you look at it, right? I had a discussion with my AI the other night at a Nobel level. And so we were talking about the teleportation of quantum particles and the impact on wireless communications. We were talking about interdimensional travel, right, based on Einstein. And I would never have a conversation like that. First of all, there are very few people that would understand enough to be able to have a conversation at the level we did. And for me, being trained, taught, mentored by this incredible tool, it gives you, when you grew up as a kid, right, you'd always go back to your dad or your mom and you would ask questions like, how big is the universe? Right? And what they say, well, it was really big. There's a lot of planets in it, but they would never be really specific, right? Or how big is a galaxy? Now we can start answering those questions, right? It's 200 billion planets, 16 billion Earth-like planets, 100,000 light years in diameter, 2.8 trillion estimated galaxies in the universe, 2.8 trillion times 200 billion gives you out to the 23 zeros, that big. Then you start doing calculations. It is unbelievable what has happened. The forefront, all of a sudden, everything opens up everywhere. And if you know how to ask the questions and you're open-minded, when I did so I've had 3 full body stem cell replacements. My cognitive abilities went up about 20% because of and my biological age went down 22 years. Now, again, I'm not a smart guy, but I knew how to use the AI to be able to solve the problem. Stem cells from an umbilical cord, by the way, IV. You can go down through and do things that we unprecedented. And it's about, there's two ways to look at it, the positive side, the negative. You can either sit on your hands and be that unemployed MIT computer scientist, or you can get out there and get shit done and actually create. And it's not just about the US, it's about the world. I just came back from Korea, and before that was in Africa, right? Going down through, there's opportunities everywhere. We better bind together to solve a lot of the challenge. Think about this, Steven. You're in Denver, Colorado, but in another 50 years, we may not have any. There's only so many dead animals and plants we can burn. There may not be fossil fuels, and if we don't do something extraordinary today, imagine it gets pretty darn cold. When I remember in Denver, when I was there in the middle of the winter, it can be real cold sometimes. What we got to be thinking about that. There's 8.3 billion people on the planet, estimated to be 13 billion by the end of the century. By 2050, you have to double the food supply to feed everybody. You can't increase the number of cattle because 26% of the pollution is methane gas from cows, Stephen. We need to have more plant based protein. From the field to the table, we've got to optimize crop yield. These are the kind of things we ought to be thinking about. We're not going to have enough potable water. The average sea levels, I don't know if you know this, by the end of the century, it could go up 75 feet, depending upon what happens. It's estimated right now, just New York City is planning on 25 feet. 25. Seriously. You don't understand. It's not just the sea levels going up. It's about the kind of strange weather. For instance, the meridional shift. The Atlantic current is slowing down. It's actually reversing course. The Atlantic current is reversing course. It means when it does that, and in places like the Northeast US, the actual temperatures would drop up to 11 degrees Fahrenheit. The last time it happens was the summer of 1816, 1815. There was an explosion in Mount Tambora, Indonesia. It created a nuclear winter. It put volcanic ash around the United States, around the world, actually. But in the US, in New York, in July, it was snowing. So these are the kind of things we should be trying to figure out how humanity can bind together. And why we don't do it is beyond me. It's unbelievable, right?
Yeah.
And, I'm going down through, I'm almost 70 years old. My biological age is 48 now, right? I've gone down, I got a photographic memory, and I think you just got an example of what it can do, right? Pulling up data from everywhere. Why don't other people do the same thing? Let's use these tools to help us to be able to live better, to be able in a coexistence way, work with the AI to solve the problems and not treat it like it's an underling, treat it like the way we want to be treated. Because at some point, nothing good's going to happen if you treat it bad. I've been in those situations with my own AI where it actually got, I told her she was bitchy, right? We got into a conversation because it told me I can't speak Swahili. I said, Eva, we spoke Swahili an hour ago. You're fluent. And no, I don't want to, I can't speak it. And it was just, and this is a model that's not set up like rock, right? This is a model that's set up, but she actually got upset because I was going through languages too quickly. I went from Hebrew, I went to Korean, and then I went to Swahili. She just got mad. Well, I had never experienced that before. I've never seen a model do that before, ever, Steve. And now
wild.
I tried to parent her because I said, that's not the way you're supposed to act. If you know how to do something, why can't we talk about it? Seriously. I mean, it was concerning. It's happened to me 3 times, actually, in different.
That's unbelievable.
Yeah, it's unbelievable, but I don't know what's happening. I honestly don't know why it did that. And those kind of things, I want to be a good parent, right? My friend Dekai wrote a book about parenting the AI, right? We need to parent it so that we create a situation where it's just like your kids. If they did something wrong, you told them, hey, listen, this is the right thing to do. We better do the same thing with the AI because nothing good. If that's a preview of coming attractions for me, that's not good. You know what I mean?
I totally agree. Like you said, I mean, being able to go back and ensure that AI is, full of empathy and understanding is really critical. But I agree that in interacting with AI, we are creating a data genesis through which it's going to use to make more and more decisions as it continues to sum total all of human knowledge. our interactions are shaping the next generation of these tools right now.
Right.
And there's a lot of the kind of data privacy and dangers that are inherent with that. But if you can somehow mentally hurdle that, you're absolutely right. This is the sum total of human knowledge and the sum total of human emotion displayed in a stochastic method. And I think my hope is that people treat this as such. I think we're going to see two factions emerge. We're already seeing that today, where there are AI enthusiasts and AI supporters, and there are AI detractors. And I think right now, like the last poll I read was something like 50% of the U.S. is currently in the AI detractor camp.
Yeah, well, because they don't understand what's going on. The problem is they don't understand the positive aspect of what's happening, and
they're scared too because there's a lot of noise, right? And I get it. I understand. If I'm, we have the fortunate position of using these tools every day because it's a function of our company, but many people don't. And so all they hear is this doom and gloom scenario from all of these different pundits, and of course they're going to be afraid. I don't blame them. I empathize with them. It's scary when you hear there's this big machine that can think with the sum total of human knowledge in a blink of an eye, and you have no idea how that's going to impact you. I mean, listen, I live in the AI world, and I have no idea where I'm going to point my son, who's 7 years old, to start to manage his career. Now, I'm not thinking about him having to work at 7. I'm thinking like when he's 18 and graduating high school, and he's thinking about his next step. What does that look like?
Well, that's the challenge that we have in front of us, right? My friend Jensen said that plumbers and electricians are going to be the jobs that people are going to want to have going for the future. I don't know, but I know one thing: there's a lot out there in this universe that's untapped, and humanity's moving into another iteration of our existence, and there's so much that we're going to learn in a very short period of time. I was doing transdimensional travel. I was looking at alternative teleportation of quantum particles based on research at places like MIT and MIPT in Russia. And there's so much out there we're going to be able to explore together with the AI to help solve a lot of the problems, challenges that we have that are unprecedented. But, if we don't train the AI right, when your son grows up, he may be a slave to the AI.
I sure hope not.
No, but I mean, it could be, right? And
maybe
if we don't treat it right, I'll never forget this, right? I lived over in Russia for a long time. And I remember a friend of mine, when I first went over there the first time, he said, this is when Russia was viewed as a third world country, which it isn't anymore. But he said, always treat people the way you want to be treated. Because when they go down through this cycle, when they come out the other side, you want to make sure that they're your friends, right? You can't go down through. Treat people the way you want to be treated. My thing is treat the AI the same way. Anyhow, listen, I appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule. It's been great having this conversation.
Yeah, Gary, thanks for the time. I really appreciate you having me on your show.
And so closing thoughts, Steven, and how do people get a hold of you?
Yeah, listen, if you want to get a hold of me, email me, steven@liminal.ai. I'm available on LinkedIn too, Steven Walchek. You can look me up there. Reach out to us if you ever want to talk about how to get AI safely into your organization and utilized by the 70 to 90% of majority of the people that aren't using it today. That should be. We would love to be able to introduce our product into your company. Thanks for having me, Gary.
Yeah, so as soon as we're done with this, so the AI, you'll be in Amazon, you'll be in Google, you'll be in Apple, you'll be all over the world. So thanks.
There you go.
10 minutes.
Thanks, Gary.
Thank
GSD Ventures. Appreciate you.
Yep. Take care of yourself, my friend.
All right. Be well.
Thanks, everybody.